Hello and welcome to Electronic Specifier Insights, the podcast for electronics engineers. I'm your guest host, Sheryl Miles. In today's episode, I talk to Jeana Bolanos, CEO and founder of SalesE, a platform that streamlines B2B sales workflows using AI-driven insights. We talk about the origin story of SalesE, the importance of transparency in AI, and the potential up and downside for agentic AI, and so much more. I hope you enjoy the episode. Let's get started. I'm Sheryl, and I'm happy to introduce you to Jeana Bolanos, founder and CEO of SalesE. Jeana, it's great to have you here today. Firstly, how are you?
Oh, I'm so good. Thank you, Sheryl, for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
No, absolute pleasure. I'm really glad you're on. So let's just start with an introduction of yourself and your background.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I, right after college, I went directly into the United States Navy. I was a nuclear engineer there for 6 years before I went and got a real job. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I worked with a headhunter. I thought I wanted to do something in tech sales, but I didn't even really know what that was. And he was phenomenal and placed me in the semiconductor industry, which at the time I did not know what a semiconductor was. And I thought, I'll try this for a while. And I ended up staying for a decade. Absolutely loved it. I was working in between manufacturing and distribution, representing phenomenal companies with such interesting technology. And it was just a really, really the most incredible decade of my life. And leaving that industry was a really hard decision, but I did that about 2 years ago to start. Back then it was called ALN Technology. Now it is SalesE. We have transformed, and it's been such a fun 2 years diving into the software side, integrating AI, and it's been quite a journey.
Fantastic. Yeah, it certainly sounds it, from the Navy to semiconductors to founder. So whilst we're on that then, could you just tell me a bit about the company that you founded, SalesE?
Yes, we are. We're an AI first rules engine. So I have two phenomenal co-founders, Jake and Carl. Carl he spent 25 years developing rule engines. So he exited the company Decisions a couple years back, which is a large, well-known rule engine. And he's come on and developed a rule engine for us. And Jake is our AI expert. And so between and I bring the industry knowledge of distribution and manufacturing. And so the three of us right now, over the last 18 months, we have created a structure for guardrails for AI implementation in really complex enterprise scenarios. So within distribution and manufacturing, there's so many moving parts, and everything is high risk, high stakes, and highly nuanced. And so this is a perfect application where AI can make huge improvements in efficiency, but there have to be codified rules and boundaries for the AI implementation. And this is what we do.
Fantastic. Yeah, and that leads me on to a question that I had, because I think just to give our listeners like a feel for like SalesE and how it operates, which you summed up nicely. But I've read a bit that there's that tension between like navigating speed and accuracy, which seems what you're building to sort of counteract. So how have you managed to, between the three of you, sort of like navigate that potential trade-off by generating like, fast responses for people who want a quick response, but being technically accurate?
Well, because this is the challenge. In these high stakes environments, there is no room for error. And coming from the nuclear engineering background, it's a little bit different in manufacturing, but it's the same idea that failure is not an option. You cannot provide a wrong answer. You cannot make a wrong decision in these types of environments because it's too risky. It's too expensive. And so this is exactly the problem that we are solving for. And so what we do is, when you're integrating AI, whether it's machine learning or large language models, natural language processing, the parts of the operational workflow that we integrate to are very intentional. And in these processes, we integrate the AI using our rule engine. And so what a rule engine is it's a really complex set of logic. And so you can create whether it's making sure that you are compliant with external policies, with operational workflows. You write the rules just like you would say them. So it doesn't take any technical expertise. The companies that we work with, they just tell us, this is how we operate. These are the rules that we follow. This is the compliance that we have to be aligned with. And we write that into their system. And so what allows it to be 100% accurate and to not allow any mistakes is that we have a human in the loop architecture. So anything that falls outside of the predefined rules or something that the system doesn't recognize or is maybe a corner case, it gets routed to the most appropriate person to handle that. And in many cases, we're able to send along with not only the corner case, but all of the data behind it. So the system says, here's the data that we have. And so the person can make a faster decision, but it's still a human being making that decision in that case. And then anything that doesn't fall into a corner case, meets all of the rules, then those things can be automated. But by the time that they've gotten to that point, we are sure that what we're automating is accurate. Because if it's not, then it's been sent to a person so that they can apply the nuance, the morality in some cases, right? If it's a gray zone of should I do this, should I not do this? Is this correct? Is this incorrect? And so especially when it comes to things like price determination, automatic quoting, PO entry, if there's something that's inconsistent or doesn't look right to the system, it always goes to a person. So that's how we enable companies and organizations to have trust in the AI system, because there are no black box solutions when you apply the logic, because you can go back and you can see every rule that was executed and it explains exactly how that decision was made, which in a traditional machine learning or algorithmic type system, even the people who write the code don't really understand how the decisions are made, because it's this black box of AI, which just doesn't work in these types of high stakes environments.
Yes, so that sounds fantastic. And clearly you are flexible for your customers' needs. And I think it's a great thing that they can almost go down the chain of command and they know exactly, as you said, the points that led them to the outcome. So that obviously is where you get your accuracy, because I think a lot of people have still a lack of trust in AI, especially if they don't work in technological sectors. And as you said, your clients don't always work in technology. So I think,
yes, that's exactly right. The flexibility that comes with the rule engine, because any system, you can write rules in code to say do this and don't do this, or if this happens then do this. But the benefit of the rule engine architecture really is the flexibility, because it's a no code interface. So I mean, think about how many things change on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis. And so today your operational flow does something, but tomorrow it's going to do something different. So when these things change, our customers have the ability to go in and change the rules at any time. And you're not rewriting code and you're not re-architecting a program. You can just say, you know what, today our threshold was $50,000, but that's not, now we want to increase it to $80,000. And that's a 5-second change. So this is the beauty and the flexibility of the rule engine. But you said that people outside of technology have trouble trusting, but I would argue also that people inside of technology that see it every day and that see the hallucinations, that see the misinformation or the misinterpretation of or the misrepresentation of information. There's mistrust within the technology as well, because with these the technology is advancing so rapidly, and it is it's really difficult to trust it. And so that's why I genuinely believe that what we're building is it's so important, not only in manufacturing distribution, it's important on a much larger scale for society as a whole, for military and government applications. We have to be able to trust and understand that the trust comes when there's understanding. And so if you can't follow that logical history, you shouldn't trust it. Yeah.
yeah, no, true. And so what was it then, I guess I'm wondering what was the catalyst that sort of propelled you to go specifically into this industry and try and solve these problems? Because clearly you said you worked in the Navy, then you were introduced to like semiconductors. So what was it that made you think, there's a problem and I can solve it?
Yes. So well, twofold. The first thing really was working after a decade of working in the semiconductor industry. One of my biggest frustrations was the time that it took for distribution. So a company, an engineering company designs in a part into their design, and they're ready to manufacture, but they need to know how much their entire board costs. So they go to distribution to understand what the quotes are. They compare prices. It can take up to 2 weeks, sometimes more, to get this pricing back from distribution, which in my mind at the time, a couple of years ago, I'm like, this is crazy. This does not need to take this long. And I do understand why it does take that long, because there's nuance. There's such an incredible volume. I mean, thousands of these quote inquiries coming into these distributors a day. And so so I understood the problem. I experienced the problem, and I said, there's got to be a better way. And it really came down to timing. So 2 years ago, in August of 2022, so about 3 years ago, was when the first iteration of ChatGPT was released to the public. And so the timing of me saying there's got to be a better way, and there actually being technology that was available that made it possible to do what I was imagining. Because if that 5 years before that, I couldn't have solved the problem in the way that we started solving the problem. And so that's how it started. We took this one really specific problem. We applied the technology and capability that came with a large language model, and we learned so much. Right in the beginning, we were saying, oh, well, ChatGPT can just write the email responses, which is, that's not a good solution. It was not a good solution. It didn't work well, but it got things moving forward, and it really brought us to the technology as it is today. And the other thing for my background, I think that was really critical for me, in the Navy, the nuclear community within the Navy has a really interesting philosophy when it comes to root cause analysis, because everything we do is literally life and death. And so when things go wrong, it's really important to understand what is at the root cause of this. And so I was highly trained to analyze things from this perspective of root cause analysis. And so when I looked at this particular problem and all of the challenges that we encounter now that we help our customers solve, that I believe I rely very heavily on that Navy training of really focusing on what is the root cause and how do we start there to create a solution that is not only viable, but high quality and sustainable.
Amazing. Yeah, excellent. Because I did, that was one of the things that crossed my mind, was that how do you think that your training in the Navy helped you to sort of like make the decision, sort of approach your problem solving and leadership skills today. And I think it's a really valuable thing to understand, especially for maybe people who are just entering in the industry or are curious about it, is the fact that I speak to many people, and it's a very collaborative industry, and you can go across different sectors. Like where you start doesn't have to be where you finish. And I know that we lose many women along the way, and I think it's such a shame, because there are so many facets and so many areas that you could go to. So I think that's a really important thing to know for some of our listeners, hopefully.
Yeah, if you're a young woman in the semiconductor industry, there is so much opportunity right now. I mean, always, but there's so much opportunity, and I echo those sentiments wholeheartedly. I want to continue to encourage women to stay in and around the industry, because it is, we are creating, I say we, now I'm on the software side, but I never really left, but I mean, the semiconductor industry is creating the basis for the future of everything we do and everything we do today. And it's so interesting. And there's so many ways that that I hope that women, young women that have been in the industry forever, that we can continue to find the things that not only excite us, that we're really good at, and where we can contribute. I think it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. And you said like the semiconductor industry is where it's it's going to be the basis of everything. So let's talk about like how AI sort of has grown. So from where you sit, so what developments then are you sort of most excited about, and where do you see the biggest opportunities for growth?
Oh, there are endless opportunities. So this is what I love about the stage of AI that we're in right now, is that it really is leveling the playing field. Even from being an entrepreneur, starting a small company, we're growing and scaling rapidly. The way that we can scale today because of the intelligence that's available to us, the tools that are available to us, and what we can accomplish with fewer people it's astronomical compared to even a couple of years ago. So I think it's really exciting from that perspective of genuinely leveling the playing field, giving opportunity to people that historically would not have had the opportunity because it was so capital intensive. And you can do so much more with so much less financing today than you could historically. So I think that's really exciting. From a technology perspective, specifically multimodal AI. So this is the capability that you can intelligently understand natural language, image, video, all of these different types of things together. You can analyze and so this is exciting because of when you talk about scientific and medical breakthroughs that can come by combining in a multimodal way different types of information. So you talk about not only scientific breakthroughs in terms of what can be invented and what can be developed, but also what can be cured, what can be diagnosed that couldn't without this technology. So I think there's so much to come in the way of scientific and medical breakthroughs because of this technology that's available and getting smarter every day.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And for me, this is just my personal perspective, but yeah, I think like when you see AI in like a medical setting, and it almost goes back to your naval setting. It's life and death. You have to get it right, and I think that's where it personally for me, that's where it kind of can shine. So let's talk a little bit then about agentic AI,
Yes.
because it's just blowing up everywhere, isn't it? From your perspective, what potential then do you see in this area for like supply chain or sales flows?
So I think at the stage that agentic AI is in right now, I think there is an unbelievable opportunity, and it's also a little bit terrifying. So there's a couple reasons why it's scary, and then I'll get into why it's really exciting. Because the idea that you can say, so from a supply chain perspective, if you could say from a customer perspective, looking at a buying situation, you could tell an agent to go look at every distributor and manufacturer, compare pricing, provide an analysis, make a recommendation with that type of a prompt in that type of language. Give it a little bit more information about part numbers and your design and things like this, and then it goes out and it does that, and that's amazing, and that could be incredible. The reason that it's scary is because in order for agentic AI to be maximally effective, you have to provide it database access, login credentials. When you talk about OpenAI recently released a beta version of their own agentic, and it can do some specific types of tasks. But one of the things that it does is you can connect it to your Dropbox, to your share drive, to any shared data repository. And the reason that this is really dangerous from an enterprise perspective is because you can have individual employees creating their own agents and connecting to company databases and saying, hey, agent, go out and do all of these things. And in the process of, and I would say it's always going to be well-intentioned. I don't think the problem is that you have bad actors or people that are, trying to sabotage anything. I think people are genuinely trying to understand how AI can make them more effective and more efficient in their positions. But the unintended consequences of the data that is going to be released and shared with entities that shouldn't have that data. When you talk about IP, proprietary information, financial data, company financial data, all of this stuff lives in these types of shared data repositories. And if we're giving agents full access so that they can be maximally effective, we're really opening up a significant opportunity for unintended and unexpected consequences. So that's what I'm scared about. But I know. So the challenge is going to be that governance and regulation is currently not keeping up with the speed of AI development. And so, and this is from a moral and ethical perspective of what I think, why what we are doing is so important, is because we have to have codify in code software boundaries for these agents to get to tell them what data you can access, what data you can share, what databases, what logins, when to log into certain systems and when to access. If you don't have those policies and that governance, if you don't have that written in code, if you don't have that in a system that is connected to the AI agents or the large language models or the machine learning analysis, anything can happen. And we've already seen it. We've seen it in Microsoft released a biased chatbot that they had to shut down because it started spewing all this wildly inappropriate responses. I mean, it just there's and Microsoft is leading. Like, these companies are at the forefront, and they are having challenges putting these boundaries in place. So I think it's such an important thing, but there's huge opportunity there, because there's so much power that comes with the information. And if we employ it responsibly, ethically, morally, with appropriate boundaries, with secure boundaries, I mean, just from a data privacy perspective, I mean, it's really exciting and it's really scary.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's where like diversity plays a role as well, because you do have to be prescriptive, because you're essentially talking to a machine. So you could think, well, I can interpret that, me being a person, my brain will interpret something. But unless you're very prescriptive when you're talking to a machine, they won't interpret any sort of subtleties in what you're saying. So you have to be very, very down the line. And I think that's where like a diverse thought pattern comes in, like, and you have the diverse people, because you might think of one really good point, but you'll miss something else.
Yes, it's so true. And it's something that we so genuinely take for granted, is the morality inside of our own thought process that is not, it does not translate to machines. There is no morality in the machines, and they do not, I mean, so you bring up such an important point. Yes.
Yeah. And also with I think with the sort of, like you say, when generative AI came about a few years ago, people, this is just my personal opinion, but I think people tend to talk to it like a person. So you forget that you are talking to a machine, because you just feel like you're having a conversation. So yeah, absolutely. So if you were to then look back over your career, how do you think that your mindset towards AI has evolved, particularly as we were talking about how quickly it has developed and is reshaping the industry?
Yes. I mean, my mentality towards it changes. It changes every day. It's constantly growing and evolving, because, I mean, like I said, if we look back to 2022, the first time that I used ChatGPT was such an unbelievable light bulb moment for me, because, for those first 6 or 8 months, every time I asked it a question, I was completely blown away by the answer. The first question I asked it was, I said, describe what it is that I do. I put in my job title and the type of industry, because I always, for 10 years, I had a really hard time describing to people what it is that I did, because it was this complex thing. I didn't have the language for it, and I did not coming from the industry, and in one sentence, in 3 seconds, it provided a more clear, better description of what I'd been doing for 10 years than I had ever been able to articulate. And in that moment, I was like, this is going to change everything. And so then the more that I kept using it, and the more that I kept seeing, and so So I think there's a little bit of a bell curve here too, right? Because in the beginning, I'm like, this is amazing. It can do anything, right? And then when I created the first MVP product, minimum viable product, really didn't work well. I realized this. So there was this another light bulb moment that it is so powerful, and in that power, there's so much risk and danger because I assumed, oh, this is so incredible, it can do anything. And then I applied it to this specific situation and I was like, oh, this is terrible, right? There's no quality assurance. And so this is what's really interesting about the technology that comes from large language models is that it's a non-deterministic output. And so you can put in the same input every single time and you are going to get a different answer every single time. And so that mindset shift for me was really important in the formation of the company, because I had this realization that this might be great for fun things, but when it comes to applying to high stakes, high risk environments, to anything to do with enterprise level activity, this is not useful. Not only is it not useful, it's dangerous because you think it lulls you into that false sense of security, and so in the direction that we took the company from that point on, that was a huge mindset shift for me, recognizing that we need to find a way to harness this power in a responsible, safe, and secure manner where you can have those deterministic outputs, where you can ensure that every time the same question is asked, the same answer will be provided. And how do you do that? And so that's what we created.
I think that's really a valuable thing to bring up, actually, because it is important. It is a tool essentially to help you, but it shouldn't be relied upon in the generative AI setting. And I think one of the things that you said made me smile, because you said people tend to trust it, and it comes back to maybe confusing it with a person every now and then, and it's the confidence. This is your answer. Yes. This is what you want to read, and it kind of suckers you in, and you're like, oh, this is my answer. But then when you do research, you're like, this is not my answer. So I think that's a really valuable thing to bring up, and I think it's great what you're doing, because you're shaping AI, you're using it to your benefit, your customers' benefits, and you're being transparent with it as well, which I think is a really, really valuable thing to do, especially now.
I agree.
So before we wrap up, because that was all from me, is there anything else that you want to talk to that we haven't covered or touched on that you feel you want to bring up for our listeners?
I think, we've touched on it a little bit, but I think it's just the thing that I would want to articulate, and that I think is so important moving forward in the world of artificial intelligence, is that the way that we utilize AI in society will determine the future and the quality of humanity. And I genuinely don't believe that I am overstating the impact that this is having on how it's going to shape societies. How I think it's really important, and we're not having enough conversations about how this is going to impact employment, what people are going to be able to do and not do. Like I said, it's going to level the playing field, and that's on a positive perspective, where it's going to give more people more access to create and to innovate. But at the same time, it is already replacing really important jobs, software developers. We're seeing massive layoffs because the code that is written is not as good as a human being can write it, but it's kind of good enough, right? I mean, so there's all of these things when we look at CPAs, software developers. There's all of these really important jobs that are already being replaced by the technology, and I think we're not having important conversations about what employment is going to look like from a societal, worldwide perspective, or at least at a national level. I think every country should be talking about how are we handling this within our country? How are we preparing the future of the workforce? Because the other thing that I think is really important that maybe we're not talking enough about is what agentic AI is leading towards. Like, what comes after, and what comes after agentic AI is humanoid robots. And again, this is not, it sounds like science fiction, but it's not. It's so it's not only already here, it's already in the works. And so I think when we look at agentic AI, when we look at humanoid robots, when we look at what that future workplace looks like, we need to be focused on how that impacts humanity, our purpose in life. I think there's so many bigger existential and ethical conversations. We're really excited and focused on the technology, which I think is great. But I think it's really important to be having these other more important conversations surrounding the future of humanity.
Completely agree. And funny enough, I have these conversations a lot in the office.
I love that. We should be having these conversations.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I think that things like platforms and AI, it's all built with the best of intentions because you want to solve a problem.
Yeah.
But in doing that, then it's always going to create another problem somewhere along the line. And as you say, like, people are already being laid off. It's happening now. And with agentic AI, you could retrain your staff to say, okay, I'm going to retrain you. You're going to be engineers, but actually I only need one of you because the AI can do the rest. So then what happens to the other highly qualified people that no longer have jobs? So yeah, this is something that we really need to look at, I think, as a society.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jeana, for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this latest episode of Electronic Specifier Insights. Don't forget to subscribe to the series to keep up to date with our newest guests, and do share with fellow colleagues, friends and family who may be interested in the latest news from the electronics industry.